I would describe Memento as a psychological thriller centered around the idea of a man with no short-term memory. And the idea of the film is, through an interesting structural conceit, essentially telling the story backwards. We're attempting to put the audience into the head of this character with a very peculiar perceptual distortion, a very unusual way of looking at the world. And that's the kind of thing I'm very interested in films, particularly in thrillers, is taking a very unusual point of view and really putting the audience into that mindset.
Did you read about this, well, fairly rare illness? How did you come across it?
The condition that the protagonist suffers from, it is a real-life condition. And I researched it a little bit, and my younger brother, who wrote the short story the film is based on, he researched it a little bit, but not too much, because neither of us were interested in presenting a medical reality of this condition. We were more interested in the metaphorical potential, particularly because we view the condition from inside his head, and he views it in simple, absolute terms, which allows him to live under the illusion, really, that he can replace his short-term memory with his systems of notes and pictures and tattoos and so forth. Ultimately, the film is really just an extrapolation of the way I live my life. You know, I write notes on my hands, I take pictures of things, I have objects around, you know, in my apartment to remind me of things, you know, this sort of thing. So the script really is just an exaggeration of this. And I felt that was very important to maintain, because to me what makes the film interesting is that it is an exaggeration, an extrapolation of all of our lives. It's not a freak show. You know, this is not a freakish character. This is actually an everyman. This is one of us. He's a vehicle for making us think about our place in the world and how we identify ourselves in a slightly different way.
Is it something you're afraid of? Like your ultimate nightmare, maybe?
I think it's my ultimate nightmare since I wrote the script. I wasn't that aware of these issues before, but the idea just struck me as so fascinating. And then when I came to write the script, it was necessary to really immerse myself in the concept of identifying what my short-term memories are, how I use my short-term memory, and extrapolating from that how it would be to lose that facility. And actually, when you start thinking in those terms, and I know Guy Pearce playing the role found the same thing, it becomes very, very frightening as you realize how fragile that mechanism is and how unreliable it is.
Yeah, you said frightening for Guy Pearce. Was it difficult for the actors to follow to do it, to get into this structure?
Well, Guy certainly has told me that he found it easy to play the role simply because he was so excited by it. He was so intrigued by the character's mechanism, by his thought process. And so he was very quickly able to tap into that. And what he pointed out to me very early on is that the structural concerns were not really a problem, because as an actor, what you're usually having to do is present a character and forget what's going to happen to the character, because you've read the whole script as an actor. You know what's going to happen, but you have to forget it. This film is inverted, so he's having to forget what happened to him in the past, but it's much the same process of, you know, as an actor, being in the moment that that character is in, and only having the knowledge that that character has at any given moment. So in fact, I think of all the people involved with the film, from, you know, producers to, you know, continuity to all the different departments, I think the actors in a way found it the easiest, because particularly in the case of Leonard, the story is all written from his point of view. So as an actor, when you come to the script, you tap straight into that point of view. You imagine things through that point of view, and the whole script is aimed at suggesting that mental state. So I think Guy found a lot to get his teeth into with that role.
You think the story could have been told simply chronologically?
The story couldn't be told chronologically for a very simple reason, which is that if you reorder the elements of the story chronologically, logically it holds together. I felt that was important, that logically it would hold together. But it tells a completely different story. It's pretty much unwatchable. It's just this guy being abused by people around him and all the rest. For me, the interest of the material was to get inside his head and to see himself in the heroic terms that he sees himself, the way he casts himself as the avenging hero. And the only way to do that, as far as I could see, was to deny the audience the same knowledge that he's denied, in that way, make them see things through his point of view. And the way I came up with to do that was to order the story backwards. I wrote the story exactly as I wanted to see it on screen. I wrote it backwards. I've never viewed the elements sort of turned around the other way. And to me, the structure and the content are inseparable. And if you reordered the material, you'd have a completely different story.
I was wondering, how come he remembers that he's ill? I mean, it's not remembering is part of his illness. I mean,
not remembering is part of his illness, and as we developed the character, it became clear that this is somebody who needs to have knowledge of this particular condition, of his own condition, that he acquired before being struck by the condition. Because, of course, obviously, once you stop being able to make new memories, it will become difficult, if not impossible, to retain much information about his own condition. And so we conceived of this character who's an insurance investigator who has looked into this condition in the past. One of the things I found in researching it is that repetitive behavior, habitual behavior, can be used in many ways to replace the short-term memory. And my conception of this character is that we're seeing him after quite some period suffering with this condition. The film never specifies how long, because he can't know how long, but certainly years. And he has a little tattoo on his hand that's always visible to remind him of this other person who had the same condition. And the idea is that through years of repetitive behavior and habitual behavior, focusing on this issue, he's managed to put it into his subconscious, which, as I looked at real-life cases insofar as I did, habitual behavior is the key to trying to get through life. You're taught very early on to always keep your keys in the same pocket, you know, your wallet in the same pocket, your glasses in the same pocket. And one of the things that amused me about that is I've actually always done that in life anyway, because I worry about my memory, and so I do keep, I keep my glasses always in this pocket, so I never have to think about where they are. It's instinctive because it's been absorbed into your subconscious through habitual behavior. And that's an element of the film deals with, is this difference between unconscious memory, habitual memory, and conscious short-term memory.
I found it very claustrophobic, almost depressing. You're trapped inside his illness, so to speak. Is that a common reaction to your film?
There are a lot of different reactions to the film. It strikes people in very different ways, but a lot of people feel very absorbed into the mindset of the character, which is certainly the idea. And some people find that confusing and frustrating. Other people find that kind of exciting to be taken through that. And some people find it depressing because it starts to make them question their own short-term memory a little bit. And I certainly sort of found that writing it. And in the finished film, we've certainly attempted to maintain a sense of humor, because I felt like this character, in order to keep going as he does, in order to be a survivor as he is, he would have to have some sense of humor about himself and his condition. And I think Guy Pearce and Joe Pantoliano, particularly, they do a very good job of just communicating a little bit of that sense of humor and that ironic detachment from the bleakness of the situation. And some people respond more to the humor, some people respond more to the confusion. It certainly seems to be a film that's very open to people's interpretation of it.
Why did you choose Guy? He's a pretty interesting choice.
Guy Pearce was suggested to me by the producer, and I had seen LA Confidential and I had seen Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, but I hadn't really thought about the actor as the same actor from both films. And once I realized that this is an actor who's done these two roles, you look at these two films and you say, this actor can do absolutely anything he sets his mind to. What I was really looking for, because the role was written as an everyman, I mean, there are lots of different people who could have played it. What I was looking for is an exceptionally talented actor who got the role and became very excited by what they could do with that character. As soon as I met Guy, it was very clear that he'd seen all these possibilities for how he could interpret this character. And as a director, it's very exciting to work with an actor with that imagination, and an actor who's prepared to reinvent himself physically and mentally for each role. He's not a star persona. You know, Guy Pearce isn't a star persona that carries from film to film. He's different in every film he does. And to me, that's very exciting, because you know that you're going to get a unique character. You know, Guy's about to go off and shoot another film. It's not going to be the same character. Leonard is, you know, Leonard is ours in our film, and for me, that's very satisfying.
The ending it's not crystal clear, or is it?
The interesting thing about the ending to me is that some people think it is crystal clear. Most people think it's confusing and ambiguous, and a little bit frustrating. As far as I'm concerned, the way the ending is intended to work is that, for me, the film is all about his subjective view of the world and his inability to perceive any kind of objective truth beyond that. And for me, that's kind of interesting, because I think that's how we all go through everyday life. And I didn't want to depart too far from that at the end of the movie. I didn't want to betray those terms. So the end of the film offers alternatives, it offers ambiguities. And the audience, I think, is very much put in the position of Leonard in terms of having to choose what they want to believe. And for us, that was sort of essential. In order to make that work, I had to base that on certain objective truths, or what I consider to be objective truths about the story. And I think if somebody cared to watch the film a second time, you know, they would find indications of what that objective truth is, as far as I'm concerned. But for me, what was interesting was to not step back and say, this is easy, here is this objective truth. Because I'm very interested by the fact that we don't have that in everyday life, and we go to films to find that, to find this comfortable universe where this objective truth is always specified at the end. There's plenty of exposition at the end of the film, but the terms of the film make you question it in a way that you don't at the end of most films. And for me, that's very interesting.